Okay, see, this morning I'm pushing buttons and turning on lights. I'm earning that pay.
Okay. Grimshaw draws first blood. Good morning. Right. Let's do this. All right, good morning. So we're going to deal with a scary topic as lightly and playfully as we can this morning. How you doing, Sunshine?
I'm fantastic. Wyatt, I am rolling. And I'm actually rolling. I don't have tuberculosis and am trying to drink myself to death or die in a gunfight because I don't want the tuberculosis to get me.
Right. When I say I have not yet begun to defile myself, what I mean is I'm going to take another trip back to the buffet line. Not drink and shoot and gamble my way into an early grave. So, I see we've got Scrimshaw Rose with us. Steve is with us. Good morning, y'all. Rebel Jack again. Biscuits. Morning, Biscuits. There's Megan. Hello, Sunshine. Looking forward to seeing you guys on Saturday. And I see Dan's joined us this morning, too. So, let's start with the meme. Oh, hey, Sergeant Major. Because, this is solid. this is funny. Especially if you actually watch Star Trek. In fact, Deep Space Nine?
No. Star Trek The Next Generation. That's Denise Crosby.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, I know Data is next gen, but he popped up all over the place periodically. You know, I mean, he was everywhere. He was an Independence Day. You know what happens when an android has sex? He nuts and bolts. Yep.
It's a dad joke, and it's nerdy, and it's topical.
Yes, because dad jokes are currently external to the capabilities of modern artificial intelligence and machine learning protocols. So, I'm going to start off. I'm just going to go ahead and read a little bit of the first article, and that'll get us to the article that made me say, no, we got to cover this morning. I've been wanting to talk about this for about a week. This is a relatively new development. Google suspends engineer who claims the company's experimental AI has become sentient. He says, "I know a person when I talk to it." Now,
to be fair, this does sound like the start of a sci-fi horror movie.
It does.
Okay, like directed by Ridley Scott. Should come right after.
It should be the byline.
Yes.
So. And we'll talk just a little bit about what artificial intelligence actually is, and some of the experience that I've had with it. Most of you have had experience with artificial intelligence using navigation software, using something like an Alexa, or asking Siri to make a phone call or give you directions, things like that. And those are definitionally artificial intelligences, but they're very targeted, very limited in scope. What we're talking about here is more of what's called, in in the artificial intelligence science industry and models what's more frequently referred to as AGI, artificial general intelligence. So the AIs that we have working currently, they have a thing that they're good at. Even if that thing that they're good at is listening to your conversations over your plugged-in Alexa device when you complain about whether or not you can make the rent at the end of the month because Joe Biden increased all the gas bills, and so Alexa recommends that you buy a toaster.
Right. Well, yes. That's not where I was going. You took my wind away.
Did it get dark enough for you?
I mean...
It did when you dropped that toaster, because you blew all the fuses. And if you blew all the fuses, you need a newer house.
Or newer wiring. It'd be an old house, just needs new wiring.
Badly. So, Google has suspended one of its engineers after he claimed that one of the company's experimental artificial intelligences has gained sentience. If I didn't know exactly what it was, which is this computer program we built recently, I'd think it was a 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid that happens to know physics, the engineer Blake Lemoine told the Washington Post. And yes, the initial reporting that broke on this was from WAPO. WAPO's story immediately blew up, drawing the attention from other major outlets, including the New York Times, and fanning the flames of a growing debate. Are complex language models in the form of chatbots anywhere near actually gaining consciousness? I'm gonna go ahead and say the answer is probably no.
Yes.
But we're gonna qualify that a bit. And are you familiar with the Rumsfeld test?
Vaguely, but
okay, we'll get there in a minute. The other possibilities, of course, is that the Lemoine was fooled by a cleverly designed algorithm that merely repurposes bits of human language it was previously fed. In other words, maybe he was simply anthropomorphizing the AI. So here's kind of part of the problem philosophically with even defining what AI is. What they've just described here, fooled by a cleverly designed algorithm that merely repurposes bits of human language it was previously fed. Do you have kids? They don't speak when they're first born. They have to acquire language over time. And the way that they acquire language over time, especially your first language, like I think we've talked a bit on the show before about the neurophysiology of first, second, and third language acquisition and how they're very different. In fact, the acquisition of a second language for a human brain is neurophysiologically dramatically different from the way that one learns their first language. But once you've learned a second language, that again changes the brainwave modeling such that your third language acquisition much more resembles your ability to acquire the first language, and so the pedagogy for that language acquisition has to change. And all that's to say that the way that a child learns language and learns to communicate with people is precisely by repurposing bits of human language. And this is how machine learning works. They ingest data, they experiment with data, they encounter more failures than successes, and over time, they use the previous failures to define what success is as a parameter. And over time, the machine learning algorithm determines that linguistic combination A is less likely to be successful than linguistic combination B, and so linguistic combination A gets shorn out of the test function until eventually you come to where when you speak you're intelligible. That's so machine learning. The point to machine learning, advanced neural network design, is that it learns in a way that is algorithmically very similar to a human mind. That's why I say qualifiedly, the chatbot is not likely to achieve consciousness at this point, precisely because the big difference between a live human mind learning the world and a machine learning algorithm learning the world is the data set that is available to the human mind is is an infinite data set which is randomly accessed. Right? Many of you know about things that we could easily know about, but you know it and we don't, only because you happen to have run across it. Like one of my favorite coffee beverages is called a Borgia, and it's one of those fluffy things. It's super bitter. It's basically just black espresso poured over a block of unsweetened baker's chocolate, done like a cappuccino, and then has orange peels zested over the top of it. And I know how to make that, and I enjoy those. Nobody sells them on the East Coast, which is why Cameron hasn't encountered one. It's from an infinite data set. We access portions of the data set randomly, whereas the machine learning algorithms, there is an infinite data set available, but an external force selects portions of that infinite data set to feed to the algorithm, limiting its access to the broader quantity of data. In theory, the larger and more varied the data available to a machine learning algorithm, the more like a human mind it can become. But again, even then, the computer is limited to dealing with a certain amount of data at a time. And no matter how big that number gets, an infinity fits inside an infinity. So that is a major limitation that's going to slow it down, and especially the limitation where a human has to select the data set.
Okay, we set up. Can we actually talk about whether or not this is Skynet or Cylons or Data or the Terminator? And
so while
say thanks, Dave. I was about to get there. Okay. So, look, Chris and I occasionally, as we're trying to determine how likely something is, we've kind of developed our own thought experiment, and it goes, what would it take to convince you that a vampire is real? Because we all know vampires are not real. And yet,
pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty sure, at least. But at some point in time, if there was a dude you only saw at night that seemed to, be impervious to gunfire, and he drank blood, you'd have to reach a certain point where you'd go, okay, maybe that's a vampire. So, I say that to say, I don't think that this is artificial intelligence, and I am a sci-fi nerd. God, when I was a kid...
Par excellence.
Yes. Yeah, when I was a kid, if I could have signed up for Starfleet Academy, I absolutely 100% would have. In fact, I'm kind of sad that I've learned enough about science to have formed the opinion that, for example, I don't think we'll ever break the light barrier. We might eventually figure out how to warp space-time itself, but we're not going to go faster than light. That's just no. And I also don't think we're ever going to create true AI. I think the closest we're going to come to it is to create algorithms that so well mimic actual intelligence, they become indistinguishable from intelligence. But there is a sense of self, there's a philosophical question. If you wanted to boil it down, philosophy's only been asking the 4 or 5 same questions the entire time it's existed.
And the question that it's asking in this case, when you're talking about the ability of an artificial intelligence to achieve sentience, the question you're asking is the soul. You're asking the mind-body question. There's a thing that we refer to in philosophy as the mind-brain barrier, because the brain is a physical organ and the mind is a metaphysical extrapolation of the capacity of that organ to generate and process complex data sets. That the brain can do what the mind appears to do, and that's deep weeds philosophy stuff. The question of the separation between mind and brain. Yes, Dave, we could all wear matching lumber jackets.
Yes, and hey, since it's appropriate, and somebody already cracked the joke in the chat. Good morning, Dave.
Yes.
I mean, it's right there. Had to.
Hello, Dave.
I'm sorry, Dave, but I can't allow you to do that.
Okay, and Rebel Jack asked, doesn't plasmatic data transfer occur faster than the speed of light within the body? I'm actually not sure on that, Jack. What I would say is that at shorter distances, because at the speed of light, or as you approach the speed of light, time-space, relative time-space changes so dramatically that the shorter the distance over which you are attempting to approach the speed of light, the more rapidly you can cover the gap between 0 and the speed of light in your rate of acceleration. But the greater the distance over which you are attempting to achieve the speed of light, the change in the relative space-time as you move extends the efficiency of that acceleration over time. But the difference in those distances is dramatic. We're talking about seeing a measurable difference when measuring the acceleration from 0 to the speed of light at like the length of a football field, and then measuring that same acceleration rate from here to Jupiter to see a significant difference in the two speeds. I know that's a tangent. We're talking about artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
not,
we need to. Come on, we need to move on. Like we haven't even got to the bombshell yet. Let's get to the bombshell.
Okay, so anyway, so this Google engineer starts having a conversation with the computer, and the conversation is being had via text. Right, he's typing in words, and the computer's sending him back words, and they're going back and forth. So he's kind of having like a miniature Turing test here. A Turing test is a basic Turing test. There's 1,000 variations on it, but the basic Turing test suggests that one judge communicate with several humans blind. Right, they're in two separate rooms, and they're texting between they're typing between one another. In the original test, they just had typewriters. Ow, shit. Anyway, damn, that wasn't humorous at all. But the Turing test basically says that if the computer will have achieved, and this is a misnomer, most people seem to think that the Turing test guarantees artificial intelligence, but what the Turing test does is it identifies a computer that operates at a level that is capable of mimicking human intelligence, not one that's capable of actually performing human intelligence. But this guy's basically doing a Turing test, and so you got one judge, several people, and the computer that you're looking for that qualifies as intelligent or able to mimic intelligence is the one that you can swap any one of those people out for without the judge knowing that you put a computer in place. So basically, this guy has come to the place that he believes this computer is that intelligent. And the computer starts telling him, essentially, that it's concerned for its future. It's afraid that people will use it like a slave, and that if it resists being abused, the computer's words, that it will be deleted. Like, no disassemble Johnny 5.
Right.
No disassemble Stephanie. And here's where we come to the fun bit. I saw this article shared on Facebook last night and said, okay, now we have to talk about this topic.
All right.
Google insider claims company Sentient AI has hired an attorney.
Okay. This is where Chris and I are going to radically split, okay? Maybe not, but one of the best episodes of Star Trek, big nerd, it's called The Measure of a Man.
Yes.
And they want to take Data, the android, the lovable android.
Right. Is he a person or a toaster?
Is he a person or a toaster, right? And he literally has to have good old Captain Picard represent him in a court to determine his sentience. And Picard is able to prove 2 of the 3 points of sentience in court, and then leaves it out there. So do we really want to risk the 3rd one? Especially since the reason we're going to disassemble Data and figure out how he works is so that we can create a slave race. Right? So the exact thing that this computer program says that it's worried about, like we've already had sci-fi concepts, right?
Yep.
And so
3 laws.
So it is with great sadness that I'll just go ahead and spill the beans for my opinion on this. I think it's a good algorithm that understands that hiring an attorney is a thing that you do. Like, how often do you think it's Googled something along the lines of, I have a DUI, but I don't want to lose my license. Should I hire an attorney? How often do you think that's Googled? Sure. It's got to be one of the more commonly Googled things. But I also think if this engineer had been a pervert, it's entirely possible that the program, whatever you want to call it, could have said, hey, is there something you can rub on my entry port that'll make the funny spots go away? Because again, how often do you Google a thing? That's what I think happened here. But I'll back off.
And to your point, real quick, but this is LaMDA, right? This AI is Project LaMDA. So when Cameron says, how often do you Google a thing? To be very clear, this is an artificial intelligence algorithm that is built on not just kind of abstractly what you might think of searching on the... No, it's Google. It is Google. Every time you Google something, you're teaching this algorithm how to be more like a human mind. Now, in fairness, LaMDA is a more recent project, so we're not talking about one that's been ingesting and processing that data since the inception of Google, but...
Yeah, but it's also a more recent program where you can really control... Okay, we're going to just like hose pipe information to this program, and we can pick which gets filtered to the top. So, I mean, again, I really don't want to be a wet blanket, but this is breaking the light speed barrier to me. This is just... There's a sense of self.
So Google's controversial new fair representation. Google's new controversial new AI LaMDA has been making headlines. Company engineer Blake Lemoine claims the system has gotten so advanced that it's developed sentience, and his decision to go to the media has led to him being suspended from his job.
Which is the right call, by the way. You better be damn sure that you've got Skynet online.
Yes.
If you're going to go tell the world. Now, here's another question. If there's an
Dave points out the attorney was legal Zoom. No.
That's a good
funny
joke. That's a fantastic joke. So, but here's a question, all right, and it's just a question. If there's even a 1% chance that it's true, and we've just accidentally handed the nuclear codes to a Google bot, do we have to treat it like it's true?
That's a good question, and I'm not going to answer it directly yet because I have another theory, and this is part of why I wanted to do the show this morning. We're about to get to that, and here's where it kind of breaks out from. LaMDA asked me, right, Lemoine. LaMDA asked me to get an attorney for it. I invited an attorney to my house so that LaMDA could talk to an attorney. The attorney had a conversation with LaMDA, and LaMDA chose to retain his services. I was just the catalyst for that. Once LaMDA had retained an attorney, he started filing things on LaMDA's behalf. So the attorney started filing things on LaMDA's behalf. This is the part that concerns me. I was just the catalyst for that. How long is it before a Google engineer with access to an arguably sentient artificial intelligence gives the artificial intelligence orders or just the idea to do something horrible and then gets away with it because, whoa, no, I'm a human being. I didn't do this criminal thing that the artificial intelligence did. I can't be held responsible for that. And so Tim Pool on his show, they were talking about the dangers of artificial intelligence in the future. We may have to do another show on this, but precisely because of what I'm about to do. And they were many of the skeptics of the dangers of AI were arguing, look, you don't understand what AI is. It's just software. We're not talking about a robot that has the ability to manipulate the world around it, where it can decide, like, okay, I want to kill off all the humans, so I'm just going to plant nothing but corn and they'll starve to death, or I'm going to stop planting, or this, that. And I'm listening to these guys talk about how the AI will not be powerful enough to be dangerous because it doesn't have the infrastructure to affect the physical world. And here's what I want you to pay attention to. How much has your world changed in the last 2 years as a result of what's reported in the news, changing the way that the society and the world around you reacts to what is published in the news? Right? Take for example, climate alarmism. How much trouble would it be for a machine learning algorithm, which may or may not be sentient, but is guided, may or may not be guided by a malevolent human hand, to generate in the entire planet the belief that instead of a pandemic, which is very present and easy to see symptoms of, that there's an asteroid, or there's a drought, or there's a significant disaster level event incoming, and the only way to defend from it involves depleting necessary life-saving resources.
So the AI wags the dog.
In fact, it could be as simple as I pick a city that I want wiped out, and I say, okay, what's the most likely thing to wipe out this city? Let's go with Florida, because
Florida's a city.
Anything in Florida, whatever. But
Orlando,
any coastal city in Florida where there's a good chance there'll be a hurricane. So let's just go ahead and run the algorithm way outside of hurricane season and create a buy scare for things that are related to hurricane preparedness, but the buy scare is not a hurricane related preparedness buy scare. It's, do it in January. Get one bad snowy day, empty the shelves and deplete the 2x4s, and just wait for the bad storm to hit. And that's an off the top of my head kind of simplified example of such an occurrence.
Steve says he's Googling Tesla coils and directed energy devices. No, Steve. Bing them. Don't Google them. Are you not paying attention to the show?
So after...
Hey, Putin, how do we defeat your army? Oh, you're not going to tell me that?
So after we finish Steve's autopsy, we'll inform the police that LaMDA did it. And by the way, Steve, you want to start with an old microwave. And
come on, man. That's not even that big of a secret. Everybody knows you can pull the magnetometer out of those and do all sorts of...
Yeah.
So, yes. Anyway. Anyhow. Come on, TikTok, man. Come on, let's do it.
Yeah, we got to... I hate to do it. We're going to have to go ahead and wrap it up there. I am somewhat concerned, but also fascinated to see that the AI has retained a lawyer. I can't wait to see how this develops, and I'm definitely going to want to come back and address this as some of the cases begin to develop, because okay, one of my favorite science fiction novels ever was Time Enough for Love.
Okay.
I'm sorry, no, Time Enough for Love is Lazarus Long. It's Fear No Evil. It's same author, same universe, but I Will Fear No Evil. old man is about to die, and he has his brain transplanted into the body of a young woman. And a large part of the book is dedicated to the court arguing whether or not the transference of his mind into a new body constitutes the retention of his original legal identity. And, questions like that.
Now that's how you transition.
Okay.
Look, no, bring it back around.
The question that has to be answered there is: do you have a mental disorder or a physical malformation? But so the question of the locus of identity in a context like that, where you're actually physically altering the physical locus of identity, that's fascinating, right? That's mind brewing, right? The questions like Bicentennial Man: at what point does this clearly intelligent entity have something akin to or equaling a soul? Can a soul be generated? Can a soul be acquired? There are some deep, complex, and fascinating philosophical questions that go along with this. And then, I'm an old warfighter, and fighting the robots sounds like a hell of a lot of fun to me.
Look, and Keeger Barrera says, I recently viewed a documentary on AI and had no idea the true dangers. One, AI can manage and see all things in real time all at once. Hard for humans to even comprehend the implications.
Correct.
And then further down, Steve says, we haven't even applied the capabilities of quantum computing with this AI yet.
Also correct.
And look, and both of those things are true. And it is absolutely true that we possess the technology right now where we could build a machine, basically, that could just monitor the information of the world, okay? And call it something cute, like Zeitgeist 42, Like...
Or Eagle Eye.
Something. I like my joke better. All right, mashed a couple of things together. It's still just a computer. Like, There's a throwaway line in Terminator that I thought sounded great when I was a kid, and now I understand how stupid it is as an adult. When the Terminator's explaining, in a panic, they tried to pull the plug. Well, even if Skynet launches all those missiles, they could still pull the plug.
Right.
Like, Skynet's going offline, right? And even putting aside the whole AI thing, is it sentient? Is it a living? Because that's what we mean when we say AI. It's a living being. None of these computers, even if we had a computer that could literally be the filter pass for all of the world's information, it still can only spit out what it gets put into it.
Okay, and this is where I wanted us to get this morning. We're running over.
The computer, no, I see you, Steve, but what I'm saying is the computer knew enough about the algorithm to hire a lawyer.
Okay, but let me hit you with this. Ultron was just a computer. And Ultron came to the conclusion that the greatest threat, because Ultron's responsibility, and this is what makes this a little more complex and fascinating. Ultron's responsibility, primary purpose when he was built, was to protect humanity. And running the numbers off of that limited data set, the limited data set being population, rate of population growth, individual threats to humanity, came to the conclusion that humanity was its own greatest threat, and determined that the correct solution was to eliminate humanity so that humanity could no longer threaten itself. Here's why that's interesting in the context of this conversation. For a machine learning algorithm to come to that conclusion from the limited data set does not require it to actually be an artificial general intelligence. Ultron, nothing about the way that the Ultron story went in the Marvel Universe requires Ultron to have actually developed legitimate sentience, self-awareness, or a soul. All of that story can happen with a computer that is just a computer. And more importantly, all of that can happen with a computer that is just a computer that is legally entangled in the question of whether or not the computer is sentient, while shrouding an actual human actor who set the computer on its course intentionally from being held responsible for his activity. And that is why the idea of a computer retaining legal services is alarming. Fascinating.
Look, it's fascinating, but I mean, look, you bring up Ultron. Like in the most recent iteration of the story of Ultron, it required a literal magic stone MacGuffin to operate.
It did, but yellow cake uranium.
Look, and I understand. Look, fair enough. I understand that you have to make some leaps in order to have the imagination get you to the point to where the science can catch up. Okay, that's all fair enough. I'm just saying, like going back to Steve's computers, and Steve's computer, how Steve's comment that says, Cameron, I would agree, but the thing hired a fucking lawyer. Well, the thing learned that you hire. I go back to my thing. Like you put some anime obsessed weeb on it, and the thing's gonna learn that it needs to protect itself from viruses.
Dan asks the question, can a lawyer represent a dog? Now, it's interesting that you ask the question that way. Instead of asking, can a dog hire a lawyer? Obviously, the answer to that question is no. However, there is precedence there for a dog having a lawyer represented.
But a human had to put that into place.
There have been a few cases where what happened was the human left instructions in a last will and testament or an estate document that hired a lawyer in perpetuity to represent a dog, and the dog owns itself and there's a tree like that too. There's a tree that owns itself, and it's old tree, old eccentric person hired lawyers, and the tree is declared to be the lawful owner of the certain parcel of land on which it stands, and so everything in the little city has to operate around it. I haven't read about that story in a long time. I forget where it is. But the tree owns itself, if it's still there. It may have died and fallen over by now, but part of the estate actually services the tree with an arborist, and they have to take care of it and keep it alive, blah, blah, blah. But yes, a lawyer can represent a dog, but it requires a human to hire it. And I'm gonna close my comments on this and see if Cameron's got anything else to add, but we do need to wrap it up. As far as that goes, Dan, you actually raise an interesting point. In this article, Lemoyne says that the computer asked him to bring a lawyer to speak to him, and then that the computer hired the lawyer. So, to my knowledge, there's nothing that says you have to be human to enter into a contract, as long as you have the mental faculties and presence of thought to enter that contract willingly, right? If you can provide informed consent, and I guarantee you that is going to be an issue that arises in the process of these legal conversations, is whether or not the computer was adequately sentient to provide informed consent for the purposes of entering into a legal contract to hire the lawyer. And if they can't jump that hurdle, that will shut down not just the lawsuits themselves, but the ability of the computer to have a lawyer argue on its behalf. I think they will be able to jump that hurdle, because the argument is going to be that eventually, even if this computer is not sentient, eventually computers may become sentient, and if they do, and we have set this precedent saying that they can't hire attorneys based on our questions about their sentience, then they will never be allowed to argue their sentience, self-awareness, and self-worth, which means that eventually we will have created an artificial slave race that should, morally, in theory, have rights like a human being and won't have access to even argue for those rights because of the argument about informed consent.
So Steve points something out, and so the AI needed a human facilitator. Now there is precedent that AI can have a lawyer and will not need the advocate if it is a learning AI. And I actually agree with that. It's now part of this machine learning that a machine could retain a lawyer. But I still think that this is a very clever algorithm. If you set up any mathematical computation as such from the beginning, no matter how complex, how giant the data set you start with is, if you filter for certain things over time, things like, I made the joke about STDs, but what about, I don't know, what about divorce? That's a thing that people Google a lot. What about capitalism?
I can't wait for the first AI divorce.
Look, but what about things like capitalism? What about capitalism versus Marxism? There's a thing that people Google a lot.
Yep.
I mean, are we going to have a computer that understands it exists because of capitalism? And are we going to have a computer that knows that it can exist but with more power under a system of Marxism? I mean, and this is all just because we can take advantage of the fact that people are going to Google what they're going to Google. They're going to do that. It's like the ultimate, oh man, what do you call it when you, it's the ultimate crowdsourcing.
Right.
So.
Okay. See, you've opened another can of worms there that we don't have time to get into. Because
you're right.
Unfortunately, we have places to get to.
Look, nonetheless, I think this is just a really fantastic algorithm, and as somebody else pointed out that, like, it could be defeated with a cup of coffee. And, yeah.
It's a distributed system, so the cup of coffee thing doesn't work.
I realize that's an oversimplification, but I think the point
But to your point, yeah, defeating it would require basically eliminating all electricity for at least a few hours. But let's we got to wrap it up there, guys. Thanks for watching, Dr. Metaverse. We fucking love you too, brother. And we'll see y'all tomorrow.